So, good afternoon, everyone. I am Fabio Turco, the Scientific Director of Cannabis Scientia, and I'm pleased to be here today to continue the interesting discussion on the endocannabinoid system and its role in cognition and consciousness. This talk follows the very interesting presentation taken by Viola Brugnatelli last week. We explored the self in the prefrontal cortex and amygdala interaction. Indeed, in that section, she provided a neuroscientific basis for understanding self-identity, emotional regulation, and also trauma processing. That was and she set the stage for today's presentation. Indeed, today we will expand that perspective by looking at how the endocannabinoid system modulates cognition and consciousness, influencing memory, decision-making, and even our perception of reality. But before starting this talk, I would like briefly introduce Cannabis Scientia. Probably you still know this, but at Cannabis Scientia, our mission is to advance cannabinoid science and education by bridging cutting-edge research, medical application, and regulatory framework. At Cannabis Scientia, we are committed to promoting scientific-based evidences on cannabinoids and the endocannabinoid system, supporting healthcare professionals in understanding cannabinoid-based therapy, and ensuring that scientific evidences guides medical practice and public policy. And that's why I myself, together with Viola Brugnatelli, co-authored the Handbook Principle of Clinical Cannabinology that you can see on the screen. That is a comprehensive and easy-to-read guide to the clinical use of cannabis. This handbook covers the history, pharmacology, and therapeutic application, and also potential benefit and drawbacks of medical cannabis. But if you want to know more, just scan the QR code or go to the Cannabis Sciences website. And with this book and with this series of class that we are going to take here on LinkedIn, we would like to show that the endocannabinoid system is not just about cannabis, how its name may suggest, but it's a fundamental physiological system that plays a crucial role in maintaining homeostasis and influencing various cognitive and emotional processes. For example, last week, Viola's section focused on the neuroanatomical basis of self-awareness, focusing particularly on the interaction between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. Just to remember, the prefrontal cortex is responsible for the cognitive control, for decision making, and the conscious self-identity. Indeed, Viola summarized this in the sentence, "Who am I?" in the question, "Who am I?" to identify prefrontal cortex, while amygdala regulates emotional memory, fear responses, and the subconscious self-identity, answering to the question, "What do I feel?" So the prefrontal cortex is who I am, and the amygdala is what do I feel. In her section, Viola also examined how trauma may affect these circuits, altering the self-perception and the emotional regulation. And this aligns with today's discussion, because the endocannabinoid system can act as a key modulator of these brain regions. Indeed, today we will explore how the endocannabinoid system influences cognition. So some aspects like memory, attention, and decision making. How it also influences consciousness, so its role in altered states, perception, and self-awareness. And we also try to understand the therapeutic potential of acting on the endocannabinoid system to help in neurological and psychiatric disorder. And let's say that by the end of this session, I hope that you will see how the endocannabinoid system is not just a regulatory system, but very important and powerful influencer of perception, powerful influencer of human thought, and also how it can help to set the self-identity. But so let's now begin to focus in the core of this topic. But before starting, let's take a brief and closer look at the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is a cell signaling system that helps maintain body homeostasis. That is the biological balance between all the organs component of the human being, of the human body. It is expressed throughout the human body, but particularly in the nervous system, and it is composed by three key elements that are, first of all, the endocannabinoids, that are small lipidic molecules, signaling molecules produced by the body. And among these, we have especially anandamide, or the bliss molecule, because its name derives from the Sanskrit word ananda, that means blissness, and it can influence mood, motivation, and pain perception. And then we have the 2-arachidonyl glycerol, or 2-AG, that plays a very important role in synaptic plasticity and also response to stress. Then we have the cannabinoid receptor, CB1 and CB2 mainly, but also other receptor. And with the CB1 that are probably the most abundant receptor expressed in the central nervous system. And with the CB2 receptor that are expressed mainly on immune cell, but we can find also expressed on central neurons, but especially on astrocytes and microglial cells inside the nervous system. And then we have the enzymes that regulate endocannabinoid levels, such as the fatty acid-amide hydrolase and the monoacylglycerol lipase. And we have also a series of transporters that facilitate the movements of the endocannabinoids across the cellular membrane. For example, a very important one is the AMT, or the anandamide membrane transporter. I would like also to remember that the endocannabinoid system does not function like a classical neurotransmitter system, such as the dopamine or the serotonin system, but it is moreover not a neurotransmitter system, but a neuromodulatory system that it especially regulates, fine-tune the brain activities based on the physiological needs of our body. And it's important to remember that the endocannabinoid transmission function in a different way from classical neurotransmitters. Indeed, it works through the so-called retrograde signaling, that meaning that it moves in the opposite direction of the classical neurotransmitter. Indeed, normally, a neurotransmitter is released from presynaptic membranes, and it activates its receptor on the synaptic membrane to, for example, propagate a neuronal stimulus. Once this happens, this activation triggers the production of endocannabinoids from the postsynaptic membrane. Then this endocannabinoid travel back to the presynaptic membrane, and it acts on its CB1 receptor, and this activation reduces the neurotransmitter release. And so we can say that this way the endocannabinoid system acts as a switcher, a regulator of synaptic activity. And in this way, how I said before, it regulates the synaptic transmission, preventive excessive excitation or inhibition. And this is very important because for a lot of aspects, because it controls various physiological functions, for example, pain perception, eating behavior, so on, but it's also very important for the control of cognition, because as you can see, the endocannabinoid system is highly expressed in the brain areas that controls cognitive processes. For example, it is widely expressed in the prefrontal cortex, and in other areas such as the hippocampus, where it regulates memory and learning. For example, in the prefrontal cortex, it regulates the attention, the focus, and the self-perception. But it also expressed in the amygdala, for example, and in brain areas that regulates emotion, especially the endocannabinoid system is able to regulate emotion, acting on or balancing the inhibitory GABAergic system and the excitatory glutamatergic system. And the modulation of this network that is involved in self-awareness, so acting in the amygdala, in the surrounding areas of the brain, can also influence conscious. And indeed, we know that, for example, by acting on the endocannabinoid system with the cannabis, this can induce altered state of consciousness. So we can say that the endocannabinoid system acts as a master regulator of the brain function, controlling what we think, what we learn, what we remember, but also how we perceive and experience reality. And so it's from what we have seen so far, it's obvious that the endocannabinoid system is implied also in cognition. And we know that one of the most important brain regions for cognition is, for example, the prefrontal cortex, that is responsible for decision making, problem solving, the attention and focus, the control of the instinctive emotional impulses, and it also controls memory and behavior. And for example, the prefrontal cortex works well when there is a balance between the excitatory and inhibitory signaling. And the CB1 receptor can modulate this balance. Indeed, they are widely expressed on glutamatergic and GABAergic neurons, and the activation of CB1 receptor on these neurons prevent excessive stimulation that could lead to cognitive overload. Indeed, various studies have shown that, for example, low levels of endocannabinoids improve memory, while excessive CB1 stimulation can be deleterious to memories. Moreover, the prefrontal cortex communicate with the basal ganglia and the thalamus to regulate attention, and the endocannabinoid system expressed on dopaminergic and noradrenergic neurons influence the release of these neurotransmitters, and so it can influence our ability to sustain attention and task. Moreover, the prefrontal cortex, as you can see, is involved in decision making and impulse control. And various studies have seen, for example, that blocking CB1 receptor improve self-control and decision-making tasks. So by blocking, otherwise, by stimulating these receptors, there is a decrease in self-control and decision-making tasks. And this can be, for example, this can have implication for conditions such as addiction, the compulsive behavior that can be modulated by acting on the endocannabinoid system. And the prefrontal cortex has also an important role in regulating emotional responses by inhibiting the excessive activity in the amygdala. And the endocannabinoids acts in this circuit, such as acts like molecular brakes that prevents excessive signaling from amygdala, and in this way it prevents excessive stress response. And this is why the endocannabinoid system, the modulation of the endocannabinoid system, is implied in the control of several cognitive disorders. For example, in where cognitive disorder, where the dysfunction of the endocannabinoid system can have this can lead to dysregulation of the synaptic and neuronal activity. For example, in Alzheimer's disease, the loss of CB1 receptor in the hippocampus is associated with memory decline. And in this way, enhancing the endocannabinoid tone may protect against neuroinflammation and neurodegeneration. Indeed, there are several studies, not so much, but there are a few studies that use the CBD or even low doses of THC to treat Alzheimer's patients. Another condition in which an altered endocannabinoid signaling is implied is, for example, ADHD, the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Indeed, in this case, the endocannabinoid system acting on the endocannabinoid system may regulate dopamine release and the dopaminergic function in patients with ADHD. And an imbalance in the endocannabinoid system has been also associated with the schizophrenia, psychosis, and also anxiety and PTSD. So we can see that the prefrontal cortex is like an hub for cognitive functions, and it contains a high density of CB1 receptor that and the endocannabinoid neurotransmission can be used to fine-tune these synapses, balancing excitatory and inhibitory signal to optimize memory, attention, and decision making. So now that we have explored the role of the endocannabinoid system in neurotransmission, we can see how it can influence not only condition, but also the consciousness. Indeed, various studies points out how this system can shape our subjective experience of reality. So the consciousness that can be defined it's not easy to define consciousness, but we can see that is our awareness of ourself and the world. We can say be aware to be aware, and the consciousness is influenced by neurochemical processes that regulate perception, self-identity, and also dreaming states. And we know, for example, that one of the most documented effects of cannabinoids is the ability to alter the states of calmness. For example, the activation of CB1 receptor by cannabinoids can change sensory perception, the passage of time, and also the self-awareness. And we know that this is commonly associated with the THC, but also endogenous cannabinoid can naturally play a role in modulating the perception. And this led us always to the prefrontal cortex, and also that is rich in CB1 receptor. And once this receptor are activated, this led to changes in the sensory integration, in the emotional interpretation, and also in the processing of external stimuli. For example, THC and cannabis by binding THC, which can be found in cannabis by binding to CB1 receptor, disrupt the normal filtering of sensory input, leading to, for example, intensified experience, more introspection, and a distortion in time perception. Indeed, for example, we know that cannabis users always sometimes report time dilation. That is a phenomenon where seconds feels much longer than they actually are. But THC acts indiscriminately, we can see, on all the receptors of the central nervous system. And this is different from endogenous cannabinoids. Indeed, the difference between endogenous cannabinoids, endocannabinoids, and THC is the precision and timing of their release. In this way, indeed, the brain produces the endocannabinoids on demand, so only when they are really needed. And in this way, they can regulate the conscious and also emotional experiences in response to environmental and internal factors. And unlike THC, which floods the system in a non-selective manner, the endocannabinoids are very selective, and in this way they can adjust perception rather than altering it. So this is the difference. While THC acting non-specifically alter the conscious state, the endocannabinoids regulates how we perceive ourselves and the external environment. And beyond the role in wakeful consciousness, because what we are talking now is about wakeful consciousness, what studies have hypothesized also a role of the endocannabinoid system in influencing the sleep architecture and also the dreaming states. Indeed, we know that CB1 receptor regulate the sleep-wake cycle, and we know that the endocannabinoid can influence the REM sleep, that is the stage of sleep associated with the dreams and also with the emotional processing. And various studies suggest that by enhancing the endocannabinoid system activity, is possible to modulate the REM sleep activity, which is a crucial aspect, for example, for memory consolidation and also for also to strengthen our emotion. For example, we can imagine individuals with PTSD that have nightmares, sleep disorders, and have disturbance in sleep. And because of the effect of the endocannabinoid system in dreaming activity, enhancing the endocannabinoid tone in this kind of individuals improve their it disrupts the intrusive dream content. In this, it has been shown that in people with PTSD who use cannabis, they have less dreaming, and this is very important because they don't dream past and very emotional events. And so this is why the endocannabinoid system, the modulation of the endocannabinoid system, is a therapeutic strategy for managing PTSD-related sleep problem and also the nightmare. But because the endocannabinoid system can influence dream states, we can ask ourselves, but which is the role of the endocannabinoid system in subconscious processing? Does the endocannabinoid system has a role in this kind of process? Indeed, the dreams are not just a random neuronal activity, but they are structured, we can say structured narrative of our emotions, our fears, our unresolved experience. And so if we can modulate the neuronal circuits that are involved in emotional memory and self-perception, we can also modulate our dreams. And because the endocannabinoid system is implied in the modulation of emotions and cognition, it's natural that they are also involved in the modulation of dreaming. And the involvement of the endocannabinoid system in perception, time awareness, and dreaming leads also to kind of philosophical question about the nature of consciousness itself. We know that we don't know where is the anatomical site responsible for cognition. There have been various hypotheses. For example, a very fascinating one is the Penrose hypothesis, in which Dr. Penrose hypothesized that the anatomical site of consciousness where it rises was in the microtubules that are this small structure present in our cell that shape the form of a cell. And Penrose hypothesized that the microtubules present in neurons have two quantic states, and the passage from one to another quantic state can can give rise to consciousness. This is just an hypothesis that this has not been confirmed, but now we know that also the endocannabinoid system can be implied in the nature and generation of consciousness itself. Indeed, if modulating the activity of the endocannabinoid system can alter our perception of time, our sense of self, and the way we experience reality. So what we consider the objective reality, what is a product of neurochemical modulation? And if yes, the endocannabinoid system is also a key modulator of this, of consciousness, of this neurochemical alteration or movements that led to consciousness. We don't know, but what we have seen so far is that the endocannabinoid system is not just a system for homeostasis and cognition, but it's also implied in subjective experience and consciousness. And so by modulating, for example, perception, time awareness, and dream states, the endocannabinoid system modulates the way we experience reality on a fundamental level. And so, again, this raises important questions about the nature of self, reality, and self experience. But we reached the end of this talk, so we can draw the conclusion. We have seen that so the endocannabinoid system is a fundamental modulator of cognition, perception, and consciousness, and it emerges as a central player in how we think, feel, and we experience reality. And in the prefrontal cortex, that is a region crucial for decision making, memory, attention, and impulse control, that is heavily modulated by CB1 receptor, the endocannabinoid system balances excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmission, ensuring that cognitive processes are tuned, operate within an optimal range, and beyond the cognition, the endocannabinoid system plays also a critical role in subjective awareness and in the altered states of consciousness. Indeed, through its interaction with, for example, sensory limbic circuits and the amygdala, the endocannabinoid can modulate perception, the time, the perception of self, the time perception, and even influence self identity. And this can be evident with the effect of THC, which can profoundly alter consciousness by disrupting the normal CB1 mediated filtering of sensory inputs. That's why the implication of the endocannabinoid system modulation extend beyond the mere pharmacology, and it raises very fascinating questions about the neurobiological basis of self-awareness, reality perception, and even spiritual experience. And indeed, this talk would like also to underscore the importance of recognizing and utilizing the psychoactive properties of cannabis in medical practice. And this means that by understanding and also embracing the ability of cannabis to induce altered state of consciousness, the healthcare providers can facilitate not just symptom relief, but also profound personal transformation and healing in patients. So, in conclusion, the endocannabinoid system can offer new therapeutic strategies for a wide range of neuropsychiatric and neurodegenerative disorder, even if much remains to be exploring. And we hope that this studies always go on, because by studying the endocannabinoid system, we are not only uncovering new treatments for a various range of different diseases, but we are also gaining insights into the fundamental nature of human experience. And as the research, the science advances, so it advances also our ability to harness the endocannabinoid system for therapeutic benefits and to better understand the very intricate and delicate balance between the biological and the subjective aspect of consciousness. So this is the end of our talk. Thank you for your attention, and see you next week for another Cannabis Sciences class here on LinkedIn and also on YouTube. See you next time.